Hello, students. So yesterday you were supposed to read and outline this section. I think I'm going to try to get this section and the next section lectured on, just so you can hear it. Another way that you get to access the information. But hopefully this will be a 2-for-1 video. So this section talked about using land. So one of the main ways that we use the land is for agriculture. The land on the earth, we need to eat food. But how we grow our food has a really big impact on the environment because it is what we are using so much of our land for. So things we need to consider, chemicals. Do we use pesticides? Do we not use pesticides? There's pros and cons to each. The pesticides can sometimes have a negative impact on other parts of the environment. They can have an impact on organisms if they get into rivers and streams, especially fertilizers. We can definitely grow more food, and more of it is a viable crop when we typically would use pesticides and things like that. Versus organic, we grow less of it, but it doesn't have the chemicals. It doesn't have those other negative impacts to the environment. So kind of pros and cons here, guys. This is a very messy topic, and I don't think I have not discovered any research that gives a clear answer as to which way, because there's lots of research that say either or. Also a lot of these plants are specifically tailored and grown and breeded to be a certain way. So technically, when you pick and are breeding the plants in a very specific way, technically that could be called actually I'm going to look that up. But basically, depending on how you are planting, what seeds you use, can affect how much produce or how much you can yield per acre. Another thing for farmers to consider is erosion. So exposed soil easily washes away. So there's lots of different ways that you can prevent this soil from washing away. Sometimes when you're planting, you have to dig up rows. And then other times you have to I guess a historical tie to erosion. People were not being super careful about this around the time of the 1930s. So when the Dust Bowl hit, which was just some high winds, there was a lot of dust that blew around because they didn't leave the roots of things in the soil, or they didn't leave grasses and things to habitate the soil. And so the soil just blew and blew and blew away. That would be a really interesting thing to read about if you are interested in that. Let me know. I can try to find you an article or a book about it. Let's go to livestock. So, this is another highly debated topic of what is the most eco-friendly thing. We use farmland to feed ourselves, but we also use it to feed livestock, which are the animals that we eat. So cows, pigs, all that good stuff. So a lot of the land that we use to feed livestock is just grazing land that's not suitable for farming. Things could not grow there. My aunt and uncle have a ranch in western South Dakota. Yes, western South Dakota. And that land, you can't grow anything there. But it does have grass and stuff. And they can grow grass and alfalfa and cut hay. And that's all their little cows need. There is some land that is suitable to be farmed and to grow crops. And about 20% of this suitable land is used to feed animals instead of people. So people have highly debated this of whether we should produce meat and eat meat, if that should be a normal part of our diet or not. So part of a healthy diet is to eat protein. But some people argue that we eat too much of it, or that we can find it and get it from other sources. They argue that we would produce more pounds of food if we just had crops. But the flip side of that is protein is good for us. This meat is good for us. It's a good source of energy. The dairy that cows and the eggs that chickens produce, like all of those kind of things, are very good for us and very important in our diets. And so, like, is it worth the trade-off? And so I think just to be attentive to this and be aware of it, and maybe try to make some choices to find a good balance for you and for your family of, yeah, like, do we need to have meat with every meal? Maybe not, but definitely probably at least one. And then if you're not, like, where are you going to get your protein source? Like, are you going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? What are you going to have? There's lots of things to consider. But yeah, this topic, people go both ways. I might have you guys watch some videos of like people arguing of like, no, we should all not eat meat. And other people being like, no, this is killing the environment. It's hard, but we need to be aware and we need to be careful. Another way that we use land and we impact the environment is forests, specifically rainforests. So when we cut down rainforests, it affects our climate. It can affect food. It can affect our carbon dioxide levels. All of sorts of ecosystems, I guess that ties into food, are affected when we cut these rainforests down. So it is important for us to try our best to preserve these rainforests. And we are so removed from the situation that sometimes I think we fail to realize the gravity of it. But it is very important. So if there's ways that you can think of supporting keeping the rainforests, let's talk about them. Let's do it. Also, other ways that we use the land is like developments, our communities, our towns. So like St. Joe, like we have to have roads. We have to be able to get places. We have to have parking lots in our grocery stores so people have a place to park. But yeah, this does have an effect on the environment. This has an effect on our land. So when we put this concrete, this pavement down, water cannot soak into the ground as easily. And so that's when flooding can occur because the water doesn't have anywhere to go, so it just builds up. So also, a lot of times we get our drinking water from underground sources. So like wells, aquifers, those kind of things. And they're usually like brought into a city system and processed and things like that. But typically, the water will go down into the ground, sink into the ground, and eventually make it to these underground water sources. But when we put concrete all over the top of the ground, then the rain does not soak into the ground. And we can't replenish these water sources as quickly as they would naturally replenish themselves. So that's just something to keep in mind of like, we do need cities, we do need parking lots, but also we don't want to overdevelop things to the point of we run out of water sources because nothing's soaking into the ground, or we are causing tons of flooding because it's all pavement. Another thing that we use the land for is landfills. So we put our trash in landfills. So there's something called a sanitary landfill. I think you read about it in your book. So this is like a pretty good way for us to dispose our trash. They line our landfills with like either plastic or concrete or a very specific kind of mineral that doesn't allow things to soak through, which will help to prevent the contamination of the surrounding land and soil. But yeah, not necessarily. We're lucky in the United States to have lots of sanitary landfills, but not all places in the world have sanitary landfills that have the infrastructure that ours do, that help to protect the environment. So But even with sanitary landfills, we need to be careful about hazardous waste. So there's lots of different things that can be considered hazardous waste. So big batteries, paint, certain chemicals, those are all hazardous wastes. I'm sure your textbook gave you more examples. But it's important to dispose of this correctly. So to look up your guidelines for your particular community and city to dispose of these things properly. Sometimes we can use plants and other things to break down or to like suck the contaminants out. But then like we don't want to eat those plants and we don't want to feed those plants to other people. So we have to process them in another way that will eventually get that contaminant out of the environment. So yeah, it can just cause a lot of problems. And if we dispose of it correctly, then we don't have to worry about doing all those extra steps. Okay, the next section talks about conserving resources. This is something that we've kind of been talking about over and over again. So I'm just going to touch on it quick. But conservation is the careful use of the Earth's materials to reduce damage to the environment. So their big three, lots of everyone's big three is reduce, reuse, and recycle is how to best conserve. Excuse me. So yeah, being careful is like reducing, how much are we using? Like, can we use less of this? Can we be more diligent in how we are using this material, all of these sorts of things? Reuse of like, is there any way that I can reuse that thing? I think the Habitat for Humanity does a great job of reusing this, specifically with things around the house. They will take doors and different appliances and they will reuse them in new homes that they're building. So instead of that door, that sink just going to the landfill, they actually take it and they reuse it. And you can reuse big, small things. That was kind of a big example, but it's even like reusing. This is a candle I made. So I reused candle wax from another candle that wasn't a very good candle. And then I think this was just a glass little jar that we had. And so I melted the wax and put it in here, and now I have a new candle. So I was reusing both the jar and the wax. So that's a really great way to do. There's lots of different ways that you can reuse things. And then recycling. So kind of that is, I would hope you do it all the time. I just finished a bottle of pop or a bottle of water, and then you put it in the recycling bin, and then your city takes it and processes it and melts it back down and makes it into new products, or gives it to somebody else that will make it into new products. So you can recycle plastic, metal, paper. I'm trying to think of what else. Look up maybe that will be our homework one day, is looking up St. Joe's recycling guidelines. Composting. That's another great way to conserve, to kind of reuse. I don't know. It's a very eco-friendly thing. But a lot of people will just take all of their yard waste and make a big pile and then just let it decompose. You can also compost like food waste and other things. So this can be like fruit, veggie scraps, other organic materials, eggshells, coffee grounds. Sometimes people even do like paper or cardboard. But you just you make a pile. I've heard of some people will dig a little hole and kind of put them in there and just let them decompose. And then you can use this compost. It's really good for gardens and things like that. I know a lot of times when you go to Starbucks, they'll have a little basket and it says coffee grounds for your garden or for your compost. And you can take those and add them to your compost or add them to your garden. And it provides the soil with nutrients that help your plants grow. So it's just a great way of reintroducing these nutrients that we're not using and consuming. And it keeps extra stuff out of landfills. It's really good for your gardens, for your soil. And it's good because it keeps things out of our landfills so we can use them for longer. Because once a landfill gets full, then we have to go find a new space and build a new landfill. Recycling, we've talked about, we've brainstormed, but use things again, or dispose of them in a proper way for them to get recycled. I think that's all. Have a good one. Yes.